Human Cellmate was a wrongly jailed princess. Now he is breaking her out. If you enjoy this channel, please check to see if you're subscribed. The lock was a lie. Albert's fingers moved across the seal plate with the casual confidence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. The ornate silver disc hummed faintly, pulsing with that self-important glow the Vexari loved so much. They called it the unbreakable seal. They'd told him that when they threw him in here 3 months ago, right before they sealed Princess Yelena in with him. She sat against the far wall now, watching him work with those luminescent eyes. Her coronation dress, what was left of it, pooled around her like spilled ink in the dim light. Royal blue silk, now gray with stone dust. She hadn't spoken in 2 days. "It's just a pin tumbler," Albert muttered, wedging the metal shim deeper into the gap. He'd fashioned it from his belt buckle, ground down on the cell's stone floor until his knuckles bled. Fancy housing, sure, but the mechanism? Pure mechanical. They dressed up a padlock and called it magic. The shim caught. He felt the cylinder give just a hair. Yelena's voice came soft, resigned. "You waste your time." "Probably." Albert adjusted his grip, applying pressure at a precise angle. Sweat ran down his temple. "But I'm bored, and you're depressing. So?" The first pin clicked. Her eyes widened. Just a fraction, but he saw it. "The dampening field," she whispered. "It suppresses all." "Magic, yeah." Second pin. His hands were steady despite 3 months of prison rations. "Good thing this isn't magic. It's torque and tension." Physics. He'd studied the lock for weeks, watched the guards open it, memorized the sequence. The Vexari were so convinced of their superiority they never considered that someone might simply figure it out. They saw a human, thick-necked, heavy-set, scarred, and assumed brutality. They missed the intelligence behind the beard and the grease stains. Third pin. Yelena rose, her movements liquid despite the exhaustion. She crossed the cell, bare feet silent on stone that wasn't stone at all. Albert had spent weeks running his fingers over these walls. The texture was wrong, too uniform, too precise. She stood behind him now. Close. He smelled lavender beneath the prison stench, some quality of her alien biology that even months of captivity couldn't erase. "Your hands," she said quietly. "What about them?" "There, steady, precise." Her voice held something he hadn't heard before. "Wonder, maybe. My people would use a spell, a simple working, but you don't have magic." "Yeah, I got that memo." Fourth pin, one more. "So I learned to use what I do have. Fingers, brain, stubbornness." The fifth pin was being difficult. He adjusted the shim, feeling for the sweet spot. Yelena leaned closer, watching his hands work. He was hyper-aware of her, suddenly the warmth radiating from her body, the way her breath caught when the mechanism shifted. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "Since day 1, princess." "Yelena." He glanced at her. "What?" "My name is Yelena." Something defiant flickered in those eyes. "If we're escaping together, you should use it." Albert grunted, returning his attention to the lock. The fifth pin was almost there, just needed the right. Click. The seal's glow died. The ornate disc went dark and silent. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then Albert twisted the shim, and the door swung open with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the corridor beyond. "Son of a bitch," he breathed. "I didn't think that would actually work." Yelena stared at the open doorway like it was a hallucination. Her hands trembled. The unbreakable seal was a Model 7 pin tumbler, with delusions of grandeur. Albert stood, joints cracking. He was shorter than her by a few inches, but twice as wide. "Built like a fire hydrant," his old CO used to say. "Come on, we need to move before." Yelena's hand found his shoulder. Her touch was light, tentative. When he turned, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Albert's throat tightened. He covered her hand with his rough, calloused, still bleeding from where the stone had torn his knuckles. "Don't thank me yet, princess." Getting out of the cell was the easy part. But when he tried to pull away, she held on for just a moment longer. Her fingers traced the scars on his hand, a map of survival written in tissue and time. Then she released him, straightening her spine with that royal bearing that 3 months in hell hadn't quite broken. "Then let's finish what you started, Albert." The way she said his name made something shift in his chest. He pushed the feeling down, focused on the practical. They had maybe 5 minutes before the guards noticed the dead seal. He stepped through the doorway first, scanning the corridor. The cavern, the guards called it. But Albert knew better. He'd figured it out 2 weeks ago, when he'd noticed the ventilation patterns. The acoustic properties, the way the walls conducted cold. This wasn't a cave at all. It was a cargo bay. The corridor stretched before them vast, dark, lined with what the Vixari insisted were natural formations. Albert knew better, those weren't stalactites. They were loading cranes, corroded and overgrown with some kind of bioluminescent fungus. Behind him, Yelena's footsteps rang out like bell chimes. Click, 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 click. Her heels. Those ridiculous, delicate heels they'd left her in, part of her coronation ensemble. Each step echoed through the cavernous space, announcing their position to anyone with ears. The dress wasn't much better. Heavy velvet skirts rustled with every movement, the fabric catching on debris. She moved like royalty because she'd been trained to back straight, head high, each step deliberate, beautiful, graceful, and absolutely suicidal. Albert stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. He turned, and she stepped back, confusion flickering across her face. "Albert, what?" He dropped to one knee. Yelena froze. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment something complicated passed across her features. Surprise, hope, confusion. Then his hands found the hem of her skirt. "What are you doing?" Her voice pitched higher. "Saving your life." He grabbed the heavy velvet and pulled. The fabric tore with a sound like ripping canvas. He worked fast, efficient, tearing the dress away at mid-thigh. Yards of royal blue silk and silver threading fell away, leaving her in what amounted to a torn tunic and leggings. Yelena gasped, hands flying to cover herself. "You can't just— this is a death sentence." Albert moved to her feet. "Hold still." He gripped one delicate heel and twisted hard. The decorative shoe cracked, the heel snapping off clean. He repeated the process with the other foot, tossing the broken pieces aside. "These weren't made for running," he said, standing. His hands were gentle despite the violence he'd just done to her dress. "And if you want to live, princess, you need to be able to run." She stared at him, chest heaving. Her legs were bare now, pale and vulnerable. The remains of her dress hung ragged around her thighs. She should have looked diminished. Instead, she looked dangerous. "I am not some damsel," she started, but her voice lacked heat. "No," Albert's eyes met hers. "You're not. You're a survivor who's been wearing the wrong costume." He turned, scanning the darkness ahead, listening. The guards would be doing their rounds soon. They followed a pattern, mechanical in its precision. He had maybe 3 minutes. When he looked back, Yelena was staring at the torn fabric scattered around her feet. Her hands flexed at her sides, and he realized she was fighting tears. "Hey!" His voice came out rougher than intended. "I know that dress meant something, but it was my mother's." The words came soft. "She wore it at her coronation. They killed her, staged it as an accident, then arrested me for her murder. I've been wearing this dress for 3 months as evidence of my guilt." Her laugh was bitter. "And you just tore it apart in 10 seconds. Albert felt something twist in his gut. "Yelena." "No." She shook her head, and when she looked at him, her eyes were clear. "You're right. It was a cage, just a prettier one than these walls." She took an experimental step. The flat shoes, what remained of them, made almost no sound. She moved differently now, lighter, freer. She bent her knees slightly, testing her range of motion, and something like wonder crossed her face. "I can actually move." "That's the idea." Albert held out his hand. "Come on, we've got about 2 minutes before the guards notice something's wrong." She looked at his hands, scarred, stained with grease and stone dust, knuckles still bleeding from making the shim, so different from the soft, manicured hands of her court. She took it. His grip was rough and warm, calluses pressing against her palm. He pulled her forward, not roughly but with certainty, and she followed. The torn dress fluttered around her thighs. The flat shoes let her feel the ground beneath her feet, textured, cold, wrong for a cave floor. They moved through the darkness, Albert navigating by memory and instinct. He'd mapped every inch of his cell, every sound that echoed through the corridors during the guards' rounds. "There's a grate," he whispered, stopping in a shadowed alcove. "High up. Can you climb?" "I'm a princess, not an invalid." "That's not an answer." She squeezed his hand. "I can climb." He led her to the wall, where a metal grate sat 8 feet up, half hidden by the fungal growth. It was maybe 3 feet across, designed for ventilation, not passage. But Albert had learned long ago that human impossible and actual impossible were very different things. "I'll boost you." He laced his fingers together, creating a stirrup. Yelena hesitated, looking up at the grate, then down at him. "And you?" "I'll follow, trust me." She stepped into his hands, and he lifted. She was lighter than expected, or maybe he was just stronger than she'd anticipated. Her hands found the grate, and she pulled herself up with surprising strength. Albert followed, hauling himself up through pure upper body strength. The grate opened inward, and they crawled into darkness. Behind them, voices echoed through the cavern. The guards had found the empty cell. Above them, through the narrow vent, Albert could see parallel lines scored into the metal, machine-precise, regular. Not cave formations at all. They were in the guts of something vast and sleeping. Something human. The vent was tight. Albert had anticipated this, had spent weeks estimating dimensions, calculating whether his heavy-set frame could fit through the opening he'd spotted during the guard rotations. The math had said yes, barely. Reality was proving the math optimistic. "Keep moving," he grunted, his shoulders scraping both sides of the metal shaft. "Don't stop." Ahead of him, Yelena crawled forward on hands and knees. The torn dress had ridden up, and Albert tried very hard to focus on the route ahead, not the pale curve of her legs in the dim light filtering through the grate behind them. The space was claustrophobic. Every sound amplified their breathing, the rustle of fabric, the scrape of his boots against metal. The air smelled wrong, not like stone and water and the organic decay of a cave system. This smelled like rust and stale circulated air and old lubricant. "Which way?" Yelena's whisper echoed back to him. "Straight. Should be a junction about 40 feet ahead." Should be. He was navigating by sound and intuition, following the ventilation patterns he'd mapped from his cell. If he was wrong, they'd hit a dead end or, worse, a vertical shaft with nowhere to go but down. Yelena's breathing was coming faster now. Panicked. "Albert, I can't. This is too narrow." "You're doing fine. Keep your head down. Don't think about the walls." "Easy for you two." She stopped abruptly. Albert nearly crashed into her. "What's wrong?" "There's something ahead. I can feel it." "Feel it how?" "I don't know. The dampening is still active, but..." She trailed off, then started moving again, faster now. "We need to get out of this shaft." Albert followed, acutely aware of how close they were. If she stopped suddenly, he'd be pressed against her. The vent seemed to be getting tighter, or maybe it was just his imagination, his body screaming at him about the weight of metal and darkness pressing in from all sides. He felt her breath quicken, heard the catch in her throat. "Yelena, stay calm." "I am calm." But she wasn't. 3 months in a cell, even a large one, and now she was crawling through a metal coffin barely wide enough for her shoulders. We just need to. 40 feet, maybe less. You can do this." His voice seemed to steady her. She kept moving, and he followed, hyper-aware of every inch between them. Of the way her body moved. Of the vulnerability of their position. Of the fact that if the guards found this vent, they'd be trapped like rats. The shaft made a gentle curve. The metal beneath his palms was smooth, machined. He ran his fingers over it as he crawled, looking for seams, welds, any detail that would confirm what he suspected. "Albert," Yelena's voice came tight. "There's light ahead." He saw it too. A faint glow, different from the bioluminescent fungus, whiter, cleaner. The junction opened up suddenly. The narrow vent gave way to a larger space, maybe 6 feet across, tall enough to crouch. It was a distribution hub, with vents branching off in 4 directions. Yelena practically fell out of the shaft, gulping air. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. The torn dress clung to her body. She looked wild, feral, beautiful in a way that made Albert's chest tighten. He pulled himself out more carefully, his body screaming in protest. 3 months of reduced rations had left him leaner, but he was still built like a siege weapon. The tight spaces took their toll. "You okay?" He kept his voice low. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. Albert examined the junction. The light was coming from below through a grate in the floor. He moved to it carefully, peering through. What he saw made him smile. "Princess, come look at this." She crawled over, still catching her breath, looked down through the grate. The corridor below was nothing like the cavern. The walls were smooth, white, lined with panels and conduits. Emergency lighting strips ran along the floor, casting everything in a pale glow. And on the far wall, barely visible, was a plaque. Yelena squinted. "What does that say?" "I can't read human script." Albert's grin widened. "It says USS AEGS, Colonial Transport. And below that, Cargo Bay 7, authorized personnel only." She looked at him, confused. "I don't understand." "Princess." He met her eyes, and for the first time since they'd met he looked genuinely happy. "We aren't in a dungeon, we're in a parking garage." A what? This whole place, the cave, the null stone walls that dampen your magic, it's not a natural formation. It's a human ship. He gestured around them, at the ventilation system, the machined metal. The Vexari found it, probably buried in the moon's surface, and assumed it was some kind of ancient ruins. They've been using it as a prison without realizing what it actually is. Understanding dawned on her face. And you know this place, the layout, the systems. Not this ship specifically, but I've worked on colonial transports before. Hell, I helped retrofit 3 of them during the expansion. He sat back, mind racing. The basic design is standardized. If this is truly an Aegis class, I know exactly where we need to go. Where? The armory, his expression hardened. And then the reactor core. Below them, voices echoed. The guards had spread out, searching the lower levels. Yelena looked at Albert, really looked at him. This rough, scarred man who'd picked an unpickable lock and torn her dress and led her through darkness with nothing but competence and confidence. You've been planning this since before you knew I existed, she said softly. Technically, I was planning my own escape. You were a complication. And now? He met her eyes. Now I'm getting us both out. She reached out, her hand finding his arm, felt the solid muscle beneath the torn tunic. The heat of him. 3 months ago, she wouldn't have touched a commoner like this. Wouldn't have let herself be alone with any man not of her court. 3 months ago, she'd been a different person. Thank you, she whispered. Save it for when we're actually free. But he didn't pull away from her touch. The corridor below was pristine in a way that made Albert's skin crawl. 3 months of prison grime and organic stench, and now they were looking at walls so clean they reflected the emergency lighting. The Vexari had clearly found this section, cleared it, but hadn't understood what they were looking at. To them, it was just more of the ancient ruins, smooth stone and mysterious panels. To Albert, it was home field advantage. He pried the grate open, the corroded bolts giving way with minimal effort. Dropped down first, landing in a crouch, eyes scanning for threats. The corridor was empty. Silent, except for the distant hum of what had to be the dampening field generator, or rather, the ship's radiation shielding, doing exactly what it was designed to do. He reached up. Come on, I'll catch you. Yelena hesitated at the edge. It was maybe an 8-foot drop. Jump. I've got you. She jumped. He caught her easily, hands at her waist, absorbing the impact. For a moment they were pressed together, her hands on his shoulders, his fingers spanning her ribcage. He could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Okay? He asked. Yes. But she didn't immediately step back, neither did he. Then voices echoed from somewhere below the guards, still searching the cavern levels, and the moment broke. Albert set her down gently, already moving toward the plaque he'd spotted. It was mounted at chest height, brushed steel dulled by time and the thin layer of fungal growth that seemed to coat everything. He wiped it clean with his sleeve, revealing the embossed text. USS Aegis. Colonial Transport CT 447. Commission 2187. Cargo Bay 7. Authorized personnel only. Below that, in smaller text, in emergency, proceed to Station 7A for evacuation protocol. 2187. Albert breathed. This ship is over 300 years old. Yelena moved beside him, studying the plaque. Her fingers traced the raised letters, the unfamiliar human script. Your people built this? A ship this size? Princess, we built 100 ships this size. The colonial transports were the backbone of the expansion. Each one carried 10,000 colonists, supplies, equipment, everything needed to establish a new settlement. He looked around the corridor with new appreciation. This was probably en route somewhere when something happened. What happened? No idea. Impact maybe. System failure. Could be anything. He gestured down the corridor. Point is, she embedded in this moon, the Vexari found her centuries later and assumed they'd discovered some kind of natural bunker. They've been using her as a prison without realizing they're standing inside a functional starship. Yelena's eyes widened. Functional? These ships were built to last. Redundant systems, self-sealing hulls, nuclear reactors with 500-year half-lives. He grinned. If we're lucky, she's just sleeping. And if we're unlucky? Then we're still trapped on a moon with a bunch of arrogant telepaths, and about 40 minutes before they find us. He started down the corridor, moving with new confidence. The layout was coming back to him, endless hours spent crawling through maintenance shafts on the Providence during the retrofit. The Aegis-class ships were virtually identical. The dampening field that suppresses your magic, he called back. It's not a field, it's the hull itself. What? These ships were designed for deep space. Cosmic radiation, solar flares, all the nasty stuff that would turn a crew into tumors. So they lined the hulls with an active null resonance grid. Keeps cosmic radiation out, keeps internal signatures in. He rapped his knuckles against the wall. The sound was dull, heavy. It creates a static field that disrupts wave functions, including whatever energy your telekinesis uses. Yelena touched the wall, understanding dawning. So my powers are being blocked by 300-year-old human engineering. Yeah, he looked back at her, something fierce in his eyes. But if we can get you outside the hull, or into a section where the shielding's been breached, I get my power back. Exactly. They reached another junction. Albert paused, oriented himself. Left would take them deeper into the cargo sections. Right led toward the spine, the central corridor that connected all major systems. He went right. The corridor opened up into a larger space, some kind of staging area. Emergency equipment lockers lined the walls, their seals still intact. And on the far wall, another plaque. This one larger, more prominent. Albert walked to it, felt something swell in his chest. USS Aegis Emergency Protocols. In event of catastrophic failure. 1. Proceed to nearest evacuation station. 2. Secure critical systems. 3. Abandon ship. Below that was a deck schematic, the ship's layout rendered in clean lines and labels. There. Albert tapped a section marked Armory, Deck 4. That's where we're going first. Yelena studied the schematic, her expression thoughtful. And after the armory? Here, he indicated another section, this one labeled Reactor Core, Engineering. We need to wake her up. The ship? The ship. He turned to her, and she saw the spark of something dangerous in his eyes. The Vexari think they've got us trapped in a dungeon, but dungeons don't have power sources. They don't have weapon systems. They don't have escape pods, Yelena finished, understanding. Now you're getting it, he grinned, and for a moment the scarred, exhausted prisoner was gone. In his place was the combat engineer who'd retrofitted starships, who'd built things and broken things and survived things that would have killed softer men. The guards are coming, Yelena said softly, tilting her head. I can hear them. They're in the ventilation system now. Then we'd better move. The armory's 2 levels down, and I guarantee you the Vexari have never found it. He held out his hand again. Still trust me? She looked at his hand, scarred, calloused, steady, then at his face. Saw the confidence there, the competence. This man, who'd done the impossible already, who'd broken her out with nothing but stubbornness and a strip of metal. She took his hand. Yes, she said, I trust you. They ran. The substation was exactly where Albert remembered it would be. 2 levels down, accessible through a maintenance shaft that the Vexari had either overlooked or dismissed as structural damage. The shaft was tight, tighter than the ventilation duct, but they made it through, emerging into a small room lined with panels and conduits. What is this place? Yelena asked, brushing dust and cobwebs from her shoulders. Power distribution. Albert moved to the main panel, running his hands over the controls. They were dark, dead, but he'd expected that. The ship's main reactor is still running, has to be, or we'd be freezing to death. But power's being routed through minimal systems only. Essentially, she's in hibernation mode. He pulled open an access panel, revealing a nest of cables and junction boxes. Even after 3 centuries, the components looked intact, human engineering at its finest. What are you looking for? This section of the ship, the outer hull, has the dampening effect you've been feeling, but internally there are zones where the null weave is thinner. Crew quarters, medical bays, places where they needed sensor equipment to function. He traced a thick cable, following its path. If I can reroute power, bypass the primary shielding in this sector, you can give me my powers back, temporarily and locally. He looked at her. But yeah. Yelena moved closer, peering at the incomprehensible tangle of human technology. What do you need me to do? See that junction? He pointed to a box halfway down the panel. I need you to hold these 2 contacts together when I tell you. It'll complete the circuit. Is it dangerous? Probably. He flashed her a grin. But I've done worse with less. She positioned herself at the junction, her fingers hovering over the contacts. They were corroded, green with age, but still intact. Albert, if this goes wrong. It won't. He was already working, stripping insulation from a cable with his teeth, wrapping it around a different junction point. I'm really good at my job, Princess. Yelena. Right, Yelena. He finished the wrap, tested the connection. On my mark, press those contacts together and hold them for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Yeah, it's going to spark. Might hurt a bit, but don't let go. She nodded, jaw set. 3 months ago, she would have had servants for this, would have had guards and attendants and magical wards to protect her. Now she was crouched in a maintenance shaft, about to complete an electrical circuit with her bare hands. Strange how liberating it felt. Ready? Albert asked. Ready. 3, 2, 1, mark. Yelena pressed the contacts together. The spark jumped immediately, a bright flash that made her gasp. Current flowed through her fingers, not quite painful but definitely there. She held on, counting in her head. 1, 2, 3. Albert was working frantically, rewiring something deeper in the panel. 4, 5. Hold it, he shouted. 3 more seconds. 6, 7, 8. The hum of power filled the room. The panels flickered to life, ancient displays showing error codes and warnings in human script. Now! Albert yelled. Let go! She released the contacts, pulling her hands back. Her fingers tingled, numb, and then she felt it. A rushing sensation, like water flooding into a drought-stricken riverbed. Her energy flowing back into her body. The dampening field's effect, so constant over 3 months it had become background noise, suddenly lifted. Yelena gasped, staggering. The room came into focus with terrible clarity. She could feel the air currents, the minute vibrations in the floor, the electromagnetic fields running through the cables around her. She could feel her power. Albert. Her voice came out thick with emotion. He turned and stopped. Her eyes were glowing, faint but visible, a soft violet luminescence that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her hair lifted slightly, moved by currents that had nothing to do with wind. How do you feel? He asked quietly. I feel. She looked at her hands, watching small objects, dust motes, debris begin to orbit her fingers. I feel like myself again. The relief in her voice nearly broke him. Then, the klaxons started. The sound was deafening, echoing through the corridors. Red emergency lights began to strobe, and somewhere in the distance, Albert heard the heavy tread of crag guards moving at speed. They know we're here, Yelena said. Yeah, well, that was bound to happen. Albert moved to the door, listening. The good news is, you've got your powers back. The bad news is, we've got maybe 60 seconds before they find this room. Yelena closed her eyes, extending her senses. With her power restored, even partially, she could feel the guards approach. 20 of them, maybe more, converging on their position from multiple directions. Too many to fight, even with her abilities. Albert, there are too many. We need to. She stopped, turned. He was standing very close now. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the way his beard couldn't quite hide the strong line of his jaw. Thank you, she said softly, for believing I could do this. You're welcome. His voice was rough. Now, about getting out of here. She didn't let him finish. Her power reached out, wrapped around him, gentle but undeniable. She pulled him toward her, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. Yelena? What? Thank you, she repeated, and this time there was heat in it. Promise. For everything. The moment stretched. His hand came up, almost unconsciously, touching her face. His thumb traced the line of her cheek, rough calluses against smooth skin. She leaned into the touch, eyes half closed, and for one perfect second, the alarms and the guards and the impossible situation all faded away. Then the door exploded inward. Albert threw himself forward, covering her body with his. Shrapnel peppered his back, and he grunted but didn't move. Crag guards poured through the opening, energy staves raised. Yelena's eyes snapped open, glowing bright now. And for the first time in 3 months, Princess Yelena of Aethelgard fought back. The first guard flew backward, slammed into the wall by invisible force. His stave clattered to the floor. The second guard raised his weapon, but Yelena was faster. She ripped the stave from his hands, spun it, drove it into his stomach. Albert rolled to his feet, grabbed a chunk of debris, used it like a club, taking out a third guard with brutal efficiency. They fought in perfect synchronicity, him providing the physical brutality, her controlling the battlefield with her telekinesis. When guards got too close to Albert, she yanked them back. When her concentration wavered, he stepped in front of her, taking hits meant for softer flesh. But there were too many. A stave caught Albert in the ribs. He went down hard, gasping. Albert! Yelena screamed. Her power surged, raw and uncontrolled. Every guard in the room lifted off their feet, slammed into the ceiling, and dropped like stones. She was at Albert's side instantly, hands on his chest. "Are you hurt?" "Been worse." He coughed, tasted blood. "But we need to move, now." She helped him up, letting him lean on her. Together they staggered toward the door, stepping over unconscious guards. The klaxons were still wailing. More guards would be coming. But they were together. And for now, that was enough. The armory door had been sealed for 300 years. Albert ran his fingers along the seam, feeling the cold metal beneath layers of oxidation. The access panel beside it was dark, dead, no power to this section. But the mechanical override would still work. Had to work. "Can you sense anyone nearby?" he asked, already reaching for the emergency release. Yelena closed her eyes, extending her awareness. Her power was still fluctuating strong one moment, dampened the next as they moved through sections of varying hull thickness. "The guards are regrouping, 3 corridors back. We have maybe 2 minutes." "That'll do." Albert found the recessed handle, gripped it with both hands. The release was designed to be openable even in 0 atmosphere, which meant it required significant force. He planted his feet, pulled. Nothing. Damn it. He adjusted his grip, tried again. The muscles in his shoulders bunched, tendons standing out in his neck. The metal groaned. "Let me help." Yelena moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Her telekinesis flowed into him, not lifting, but augmenting, adding her strength to his. Together they pulled. The seal broke with a hiss that made Albert's ears pop. Pressure differential. The door swung outward, and stale air rushed past them, 3 centuries of atmosphere, preserved and waiting. "Stay behind me," Albert said, stepping through. The armory was pristine. Emergency lighting flickered on automatically as they entered, revealing rows of lockers and weapon racks. Everything was organized with military precision. Rifles, sidearms, body armor, ammunition, all of it protected by vacuum seal and time-lock storage. Albert moved quickly, his hands remembering layouts from other ships. He found a locker marked Security, heavy, keyed the emergency override. The lock clicked open. Inside, ballistic body armor, rigid plates designed to stop projectiles. He pulled a vest free, turned to Yelena. "Arms up." She obeyed without question. He draped the vest over her shoulders. It was far too large, designed for a human security officer, not a slender alien princess. But it would stop energy blasts, maybe save her life. "It's heavy," she said. "It's survival." He was already pulling his own armor on, cinching straps tight. The weight felt good, familiar. Next, weapons. He scanned the racks, looking for something specific. Energy weapons would be useless, the charges were centuries old, likely degraded, but kinetic weapons. There, mounted in a cradle marked Breach Protocol, a pump-action shotgun, blocky and brutal. Beside it, boxes of shells, double-aught buckshot. Solid-state chemical primers, vacuum-sealed, stable for a millennium. Albert grabbed the shotgun, checked the action. Smooth. Perfect. He loaded 5 shells, racked one into the chamber. The sound echoed through the armory like a promise. "What is that?" Yelena asked, staring at the weapon. "Humanity's oldest argument." Albert pocketed extra shells. "The Vexari use energy weapons, yeah? Directed plasma, coherent light?" "Yes." "Their shields are designed to dissipate energy attacks. Redirect the force, spread it out." He patted the shotgun. "This doesn't use energy. It uses lead traveling at 1,500 feet per second. 9 pellets per trigger pull." Understanding dawned on her face. "Their shields won't stop it." "Oh, the shields will try. But physics is a bitch." He handed her a sidearm, a compact pistol, mechanical action. "Know how to use this? Point and pull?" "Close enough." He showed her the safety. "Only if you have to. I'll handle the heavy work." Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, many of them. Albert moved to the door, shotgun ready. Yelena took position beside him, the pistol heavy in her hand. Through the gap, they could see crag guards approaching, massive, 4-armed, carrying energy staves that crackled with contained power. The lead guard activated his shield, a shimmering dome of energy that surrounded him. The others followed suit. "Humans," the guard rumbled in broken standard. "Surrender. You are trapped." Albert stepped into the doorway. "Hey," he called. "You know what's great about kinetic weapons?" The guard tilted his head, confused. Albert pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared. 9 lead pellets crossed the distance in a microsecond. The energy shield caught them, tried to dissipate the force, and failed catastrophically. The shield flickered, overloaded by 9 simultaneous impacts. The pellets punched through, caught the guard's center mass. He went down hard. Albert racked another shell. They don't give a damn about your shields. The other guards stared at their fallen comrade, then at Albert, at the smoking weapon in his hands. Your move, Albert said. They charged. Albert fired again. And again. Each shot was thunder, each impact devastating. The shields flickered and failed, the guards fell. Yelena watched him work, saw the cold efficiency. This wasn't rage or panic. This was a professional doing what he'd been trained to do. When the last guard fell, Albert lowered the shotgun. Smoke drifted from the barrel. Kinetic impact, he said quietly, almost to himself. Physics is a bitch. Yelena looked at the bodies, then at Albert. Saw him truly for the first time, not as her cellmate or rescuer, but as what he really was. A soldier. Come on, he said, already moving. The warden will know we're armed now. We need to reach the reactor core before he mobilizes everything. She followed, the pistol heavy in her hand, the armor heavier on her shoulders. But somehow she felt safer than she had in months. They were 3 corridors from the reactor core when Kael'thas found them. Albert felt at first a pressure against his mind, like fingers probing the edges of his consciousness. He'd felt it before, during interrogations. The Vexari loved their mental intrusions, their casual violations of privacy and autonomy. Yelena, he said quietly, stay close. She was already moving toward him, her power flaring. She felt it too, the presence of something vast and predatory approaching. The corridor ahead shimmered. Kael'thas materialized from nothing, his form coalescing like smoke given shape. He wore robes of shifting light that moved independent of any breeze. No legs, he simply floated, hovering a foot above the deck. His face was angular, severe, with eyes that held the cold certainty of someone who'd never been told no. Fascinating, he said, his voice echoing directly in their minds. The human beast has learned to use tools. How primitive, how expected. Albert raised the shotgun. Get out of our way. Kael'thas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Or what? You'll shoot me with your chemical weapon? Please. He gestured negligently, and Albert felt the pressure intensify. Your mind is an open book, human. Let me read you. The invasion was brutal. Memories ripped to the surface, his childhood on Mars colony, the cramped habdomes and recycled air. Training at Luna Academy, the retrofit work on the Providence, blood and fire and screaming metal. His crew, dead, his ship, burning, the crash that had stranded him in Vexari space. Ah, Kael'thas breathed. Such violence, such pain, you are a broken thing, human. Albert's hands tightened on the shotgun, but his arms wouldn't move. His body was frozen, held by invisible force. Stop it! Yelena's power flared, violet energy crackling around her hands. She threw her telekinesis at Kael'thas, a focused lance of force that could have shattered stone. It hit his shields and dissipated like mist. Little princess, Kael'thas said, not even looking at her. You are skilled, I grant you. But I have studied the mental arts for 2 centuries. You are a candle, I am a star. He raised one hand, and Yelena screamed. Her own power turned against her, pressing down like a vice. She fell to her knees, hands clutching her head. No, Albert growled. He tried to move, to raise the weapon, but his body wouldn't obey. The mental hold was absolute. Then Kael'thas closed his fist, and Albert lifted off the ground. The sensation was horrifying. Invisible hands wrapped around his throat, his chest squeezing. His feet dangled uselessly. The shotgun fell from nerveless fingers, clattered on the deck. You dared to damage my guards, Kael'thas said, his voice cold. You dared to violate my prison. For this, you will die slowly, human. I will pull your mind apart like wet paper. Show your princess every pathetic memory, every failure. Albert screamed internally, shoving the memory of his dying crew to the forefront of his mind, feeding the telepath the pain he wanted. Under the cover of that mental chaos, his hand moved. Not toward his throat to claw at the invisible grip. He reached for his belt. Kael'thas, distracted by the feast of misery, noticed too late. Albert's fingers found the flashbang he'd taken from the armory compact. Ancient but functional. He pulled the pin with his thumb. Let it drop. What? Kael'thas started. The flashbang detonated. In the enclosed corridor, the effect was catastrophic. 9 million candela of light, 170 decibels of sound. The blast wave expanded in all directions. Kael'thas shrieked, an actual vocal sound, not telepathic. His concentration shattered, the mental grip vanished. Albert dropped, hit the deck hard. Rolled. His ears were ringing, vision white, but he moved on instinct, found the shotgun, raised it. But Yelena was faster. Her power caught him mid-fall, violet energy wrapping around his body. She lowered him gently to the deck, her own control precise despite the pain still echoing in her skull. "I've got you," she whispered. Albert blinked away the after-images, saw Yelena kneeling beside him, her hands trembling but her eyes fierce. Saw Kael'thas beyond her, writhing on the ground, his robes scorched, his perfect composure shattered. "You were willing to die," Yelena said, her voice thick with emotion. "The flashbang, in that mental grip it could have killed you." "Yeah," Albert coughed, tasted blood, but it broke his hold. "You could have died. So could you." He reached up, touched her face. "Couldn't let that happen." Something shifted in her expression. Understanding. Recognition. She'd been surrounded by courtiers her whole life, people who spoke of loyalty but meant calculation. This man had been willing to die to break a telepathic grip, to give her a chance, not because she was a princess. Because she was her. "We need to move," Albert said, struggling to sit up. "He's not dead." Indeed, Kael'thas was already recovering, his form stabilizing. But something had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something darker. Respect, maybe. Or hatred. "You will regret this, human," he hissed, and teleported away in a shimmer of light. Yelena helped Albert stand. He was unsteady, blood trickling from his nose but alive. "Can you walk?" she asked. "Can you fly?" "Not yet. The dampening is still too strong here." "Then we walk." He retrieved the shotgun, checked the load. 3 shells left. The reactor core is close. If we can overload it, the explosion will breach the hull, create an opening. "And blow the hangar doors off their hinges." He grinned, despite everything. "Plus, it'll wake up the ship's emergency systems. Maybe give us a way out." Yelena took his arm, supporting him. Together? Together. They moved deeper into the ship, toward the heart of the sleeping giant. Behind them, alarms echoed. Ahead, the hum of ancient power grew louder. The reactor was waiting. The reactor core was a cathedral of humming power. They entered through a maintenance access, emerging onto a catwalk that circled the central chamber. Below them, the reactor itself pulsed with blue-white light, a miniature star contained by magnetic fields and 300-year-old engineering. Steam vented from cooling pipes, filling the space with humid heat. "Holy hell," Albert breathed. "She's still running at 40% capacity." Yelena wiped sweat from her forehead. The temperature was oppressive, easily over 100 degrees. Her torn dress clung to her skin, the body armor making it worse. "How do we overload it?" Carefully, Albert moved along the catwalk, scanning the control stations. "These reactors have multiple redundancies. We can't just smash things and hope for an explosion." "Why not?" "Because an uncontrolled detonation would vaporize us and half the moon." He found what he was looking for, a manual override station. "We need a controlled overload. Enough to blow the hangar doors, not enough to kill us in the process." The control station was ancient, its interface a combination of mechanical dials and corroded digital displays. Albert wiped dust from the primary panel, revealing labels in faded English. "There," he muttered, tracing a conduit line. "Primary coolant valve. If we can close it manually, the reactor temperature will spike. The emergency venting system will engage, redirect the excess heat toward the exterior hull, creating an explosion, creating a very targeted pressure release." He moved to a large wheel valve mounted on the wall. "The hangar is directly above this section. If my calculations are right, the venting will blow outward, taking the doors with it. And if your calculations are wrong? Then we die screaming in superheated steam." He gripped the wheel, pulled. Nothing happened. Albert braced his feet, tried again. The muscles in his arms stood out, veins prominent. The wheel refused to budge. 3 centuries of corrosion and thermal stress had fused the mechanism. "Damn it," he gasped, releasing his grip. "It's seized." Yelena stepped beside him, studying the wheel. It was massive, designed to be operated by someone in full engineering gear, with mechanical advantage tools. For a human, even one as strong as Albert, it was nearly impossible. The heat was getting worse. Sweat ran down Albert's face, plastered his hair to his skull. His tunic was soaked through, clinging to the heavy muscles of his chest and shoulders. "Let me try," Yelena said. "Your telekinesis isn't strong enough, not here with the dampening." "Not my power." She moved behind him, pressing against his back. "You." Her arms wrapped around his waist. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the solid mass of muscle and bone. Her hands found purchase on his torso, and she braced herself. "On 3, she said. "Put everything into it." Albert repositioned his grip on the wheel. Felt Yelena behind him, her body pressed against his, her strength adding to his. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with trust. 1, he counted. 2, she continued. 3. They pulled together. Albert's entire body tensed, every muscle engaged. Yelena held on, her arms tight around him, using her body weight as leverage. The wheel groaned, rust flaked away, the mechanism screamed. Then it moved. Just an inch. But it was enough. Albert roared, pouring everything into the effort. Yelena held on, refusing to let go even as her arms burned. The wheel turned. Slowly, grudgingly. But it turned. 1 revolution. 2, 3. Steam exploded from vents around the chamber. Warning klaxons began to wail. The reactor's hum climbed in pitch, from a low throb to a rising whine. "That's it," Albert shouted over the noise. "That's enough." He released the wheel and immediately collapsed. Yelena tried to catch him, but his weight bore them both down. They fell together onto the catwalk, chests heaving, muscles screaming. The heat was unbearable now. The reactor's whine was climbing toward critical. Emergency lights strobed red. Albert rolled onto his back, gasping. Yelena lay beside him, her hand finding his. Their fingers interlocked automatically. "Did we do it?" she managed. "Yeah," he laughed, exhausted. "We did it. In about 4 minutes, the pressure release will blow. 4 minutes to get out of here? That's the idea." Neither of them moved. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion and the crushing heat. Yelena turned her head, looking at Albert's profile. His beard was plastered to his face with sweat. His eyes were closed. He looked half dead. He looked beautiful. "Albert," she said softly. "Yeah? Thank you. For all of this." He opened his eyes, turned to meet her gaze. "You keep saying that, because I keep meaning it." Steam billowed around them. The reactor's whine climbed higher. Warning messages scrolled across displays in English and symbols. "We should move," Albert said. "We should," but for another heartbeat, they lay there, hands joined, suspended in a moment of perfect understanding. The line between partners and something more had blurred so completely it no longer existed. Then Albert sat up, pulled her with him. "Come on, princess, our ride's about to arrive." They ran for the exit as the reactor began its final crescendo. Behind them, pressure built toward critical mass. The ancient ship's emergency systems engaged, routing superheated coolant toward the exterior hull. Toward the hangar, toward freedom. They burst through the maintenance door just as the explosion hit. The shockwave threw them forward. Albert twisted, taking the impact on his back, cradling Yelena against his chest. They tumbled down a corridor, finally coming to rest in a tangled heap against a bulkhead. Yelena looked up, saw Albert beneath her, his arms still wrapped protectively around her body. "You okay?" he asked. She laughed, a sound that bordered on hysterical. "I think so. You? I've been worse." A distant boom echoed through the ship, the hangar doors blown clear. They had their exit. Now they just had to reach it. The hangar was chaos. Albert and Yelena emerged from the access corridor into madness. The explosion had torn the massive doors clean off, twisted metal and ancient composite material lay scattered across the deck. Beyond the gaping hole, vacuum beckoned stars visible in the eternal night. But the hangar itself was collapsing. The pressure release had worked too well. Structural supports groaned under unequal stress. Sections of the ceiling, massive ferroconcrete beams that had held for 3 centuries, were failing. Warning klaxons screamed. Emergency bulkheads began to slam shut, the ship's automatic systems trying to contain the breach. "There," Yelena pointed. Against the far wall, barely visible through the settling debris, a row of escape pods. Small, single-use craft designed for exactly this scenario. Maybe a dozen of them, nested in their launch cradles like eggs. Between them and the pods, 50 meters of collapsing hell. "We need to move," Albert said. "Now." They ran. A beam fell to their left, 20 feet of solid metal crashing down with enough force to crater the deck. Yelena threw up a telekinetic barrier on instinct, deflecting smaller debris. But her power was still dampened here, still weak. "I can't protect us from everything," she gasped. "I know." They dodged right, avoiding a cascade of falling plates. The hangar's atmosphere was venting through the breach, not explosive decompression. The emergency systems were preventing that, but enough to create dangerous winds that pulled at their clothes. 30 meters to the pods. A support column gave way directly above them. Albert looked up, saw it falling, massive, inevitable. too big for Yelena to deflect, too fast to outrun. He stopped. Albert, what are you? Keep going! He planted his feet, raised his arms. Go. No. The beam fell. Albert didn't try to stop it, he stepped under the angle of the fall and braced. The impact drove him to one knee, his armored shoulder pauldron cracked under the load, his spine compressed, breath hissing out through clenched teeth. He became a living wedge, keeping the 2 tons of metal inches from crushing them, suspended by nothing but human stubbornness and bone density that had evolved under gravity 50% higher than Earth standard. Go! He roared. Yelena stared at him, this impossible man, holding up a building while she ran. Everything in her heritage screamed that this was wrong. She was royalty. She was meant to be protected, not to abandon those who protected her. Everything in her heart screamed something different. She didn't run. Her power flared, instead violet energy erupting from her body like a star going nova. The dampening field still pressed down, still tried to suppress her abilities, but fury and desperation are their own kind of power. The beam lifted. Not much, just enough. Albert felt the weight lessen, looked up through the pain. Saw Yelena standing 10 feet away, both hands extended, her eyes burning with violet fire. Her power wrapped around the beam, around him, lifting both. I said go, he shouted. And I said no. She thrust her hands upward, and the beam flew launched across the hangar to crash harmlessly against a far wall. They stood there, panting. Albert's shoulders were screaming. Yelena's nose was bleeding, the strain of using her power through the dampening field taking its toll. You should have run, Albert said. You should have run. She moved to him, grabbed his arm. We do this together or not at all. Footsteps echoed behind them. Crag guards, dozens of them, pouring into the hangar. Energy weapons charged. They'd found the breach, realized where their prisoners were heading. Together it is, Albert said. He pulled the shotgun from where he'd secured it on his back. 2 shells left. Run with me? Always. They ran for the pods. The guards opened fire. Energy bolts seared through the air. Yelena deflected what she could, her telekinesis forming a sporadic shield. Albert returned fire when targets presented themselves. 2 shots, 2 guards down. 20 meters. A bolt caught Albert's shoulder. He grunted, stumbled, kept moving. Yelena's power wrapped around him, supporting him without breaking stride. 10 meters. The lead guard charged, all 4 arms swinging. Albert met him head-on, ducked low, drove his shoulder into the guard's midsection. They went down together. Albert didn't try to fight clean. He went for the throat, the eyes, fighting like a cornered animal. The guard died choking. Yelena pulled Albert up. The pods were right there. She slammed her hand on the access panel. The nearest pod's hatch cycled open with a hiss. Get in, she shouted. Albert practically fell through the hatch. Yelena followed, and the moment she cleared the threshold, she used her power to slam the hatch shut. The locks engaged automatically. Inside, the pod was cramped, designed for 2 humans in emergency suits, not 2 people in armor and torn clothing. They collapsed against each other, gasping. Launch sequence, Albert managed, reaching for the control panel. We need to. Yelena's hands were already there, following his pointed instructions. She couldn't read English, but she followed his gestures. Big red button, here, confirmation switch, there. The pod shuddered, docking clamps released. Through the small viewport, they saw the hangar falling away. Saw the guards running for cover as more structural supports failed. Saw the massive hull of the USS Aegis, finally visible in its entirety, a colony ship 3 kilometers long, embedded in the moon like a broken sword. Then the pod's emergency thrusters engaged, and they were thrown back against the acceleration couches. The moon fell away. The prison fell away. They were free. The pod drifted in the silence of vacuum. Through the viewport, they watched the prison, the Aegis, the tomb that had held them continue to collapse. Secondary explosions blossomed along her hull as ancient systems failed catastrophically. The moon's surface cratered where hangar sections fell inward. In an hour, maybe less, the entire structure would be rubble. They'll die, Yelena whispered. Kael'thas, the guards, all of them. Yeah. Albert's voice was flat. They will. She looked at him. Does that bother you? They kidnapped me, threw me in a cell, tortured you for 3 months. He met her eyes. No, it doesn't bother me. The pod's emergency beacon was active, broadcasting distress on all human frequencies. Help would come eventually. Human space was vast, but there were patrol routes, merchant vessels. Someone would hear. Until then, they had the pod. And each other. Yelena reached up, touched the wound on Albert's shoulder where the energy bolt had grazed him. He winced. Sorry, she said. It's fine. It's not fine, none of this is fine. Her voice broke slightly. You could have died, multiple times. You nearly died holding up that beam. But I didn't. He caught her hand, held it against his shoulder. We made it, both of us. The zero gravity made everything feel unreal. They drifted in the cramped space, held in place only by the acceleration couch straps. Yelena's hair floated around her face like a halo. The torn dress, the armor, all of it seemed absurd now. What happens next? She asked. Human patrol picks us up, we get debriefed, I get shipped back to whatever posting will take me. You, he paused, you go home, take your throne back. Just like that? Just like that. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. The beard was singed on one side. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like hell. He looked like home. My kingdom needs rebuilding, she said slowly. The Vexari coup killed a quarter of my court. The infrastructure is damaged. The people are frightened. You'll fix it. You're smart enough, strong enough. I'll need help, advisors, people I can trust. Her eyes held his. People who can see past the obvious, who can solve impossible problems with stubbornness and scrap metal. Albert's breath caught. Yelena. My kingdom has magic. We have telepaths and telekinetics and centuries of tradition. She moved closer, the zero gravity letting her drift until their faces were inches apart. What we don't have is iron, practical engineering, the kind of thinking that looks at an impenetrable seal and sees a pin tumbler lock. You're asking me to stay. I'm asking you to come home with me. Her hand found his, their fingers interlocking like they had in the reactor core, on the catwalk in the chaos. You broke me out of that prison. Now help me rebuild what was taken. I'm not a diplomat, not a politician. No, she smiled, and it transformed her face, the exhausted, wounded princess, becoming something fiercer. Something that had survived hell and come out stronger. You're a combat engineer who knows how to make impossible things work. That's exactly what I need. Albert looked at their joined hands, thought about going back to his posting, back to the routine of military service, thought about never seeing her again, thought about what they'd built together in 3 days of impossible odds. Your court will hate me, he said finally. Probably. I don't know anything about your culture, your politics. You'll learn. I'm going to make a terrible advisor. You'll make a perfect advisor. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead against his. Because you'll tell me the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. In the viewport behind her, the prison continued to crumble. The moon's surface was scarred now, marked by the impact of falling metal. The Aegis's death throes would be visible from space for years. But they'd survived. Okay, Albert said quietly. Okay? Yeah, he squeezed her hand. I'll come with you, help you rebuild. Be your iron when you need it. The smile that crossed her face was worth every risk he'd taken. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, princess. Yelena. Right, Yelena. He grinned, exhausted and battered and somehow happy. Though if I'm staying, you should probably teach me the proper forms of address. Can't have your new advisor insulting visiting dignitaries. I'll teach you everything you need to know. She shifted, settling against him in the cramped space. The zero gravity let her press close without weight or pressure. Starting with the first lesson. What's that? The Aethelgard word for home. She intertwined their fingers completely, palm to palm. It's Shaleth. It means where you are known. Albert tested the word, Shaleth. Perfect pronunciation. They drifted together in the pod's small cabin, watching the debris field expand. Somewhere in human space, a patrol ship would receive their beacon. Help would come. They'd be separated for debriefings, medical examinations, all the bureaucracy that came with a prison break and escaped royalty. But after that, they'd go home. Together. Albert? Yelena said softly. Yeah? When we get back, when I take the throne, they'll expect me to marry. To produce heirs. To secure the succession. His chest tightened, I figured. The traditional choice would be another royal, someone of status and breeding. She looked up at him. Someone who didn't hold up a collapsing building with his bare hands to save my life. Yelena, I'm not asking for promises. Not yet, she settled more firmly against him. But when the time comes, when I need to choose, I want you to know that you'll be my choice, if you'll have me. Albert's throat was tight. That's a hell of an offer for a combat engineer with grease under his nails. That's a hell of an offer for the man who saw the impossible and made it possible. She smiled. Think about it, you have at least a few hours before rescue. Few hours, huh? Maybe a day. Depends on patrol routes. Then I better make good use of the time. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close in the zero gravity. Let me tell you about Earth, about Mars colony and the Habdomes, about my training and why I ended up in Vexari space. I want to hear everything. So he told her, and she listened, and together they drifted in orbit above a collapsing prison, two survivors who'd found something neither had expected: each other. In the viewport, the first human patrol ship appeared, a distant gleam of reflected starlight.